Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another session of Philosophy and Model of Early Childhood Education. Today, we will be talking about the Reggio Emilia philosophy of education, and I'm sure this is something that's very familiar to everybody because we've been talking about it since literally the first semester. With me today are Anisha, Teresa, Kate, and Frangus. I am Alexa, and today we will be diving into the history of Reggio Emilia, the aim of education, the role of the teacher, the image of the child, curriculum and methods, theories and philosophies aligned to this specific pedagogy or philosophy, the local and global examples we'd like to share with you all, a critique and reflective dialogue amongst our group. So first off, we have the history of Reggio Emilia. Take it away, Kate.
The root of the approach is go back into the late 1800s. In 1860, the Reggio Emilia chapter of Sacro Monte di Prete, an Italian charitable financial institution, opened the preschool for children living in poverty. And later in 1913, the municipality opened a municipal preschool in Villa Gaida. In 1938, the Francis regiment closed down all the municipal preschool. But after World War II, the Italian Women Union helped create and run of a 60 self-image preschool in the province, and that became a fundamental of the identity of Reggio Emilia in the future educational project. After World War II, this slide shows the first municipal preschool that was opened in 1963, and Lolis Malagusi played an important role in shaping the new education project. In 1971, the first infant and toddler center was opened for children in age of 0 to 3 years old, which explains service for younger children. And the Regolamento or rule book was approved, which outlined the educational content and organization structure. In 1981, the 100 Language of Children, which we all heard about, introduced Reggio Emilia works at the international audience. In 1991, Newsweek, the magazine, described the Reggio Emilia school, the Diana Preschool, as the one of the most advanced early childhood school in the world. And finally, 1994, Reggio Students was founded to promote professional learning and support rights and potential of children. And this is how Reggio Emilia grew from local educational project into the global respect approach. And next slide, we will talk about the aim of education. In this philosophy, children are seen as capable learners with rights and strong potential. They are active participants in their learning. And the center of the idea is that children learn through many ways of thinking, expressing, and communicating, which known as 100 language of children. And the approach are value, curiosity, creative, and participation, and the sense of belonging. Education is not only about teaching the information, but also helping the children to make a meaning through relationship with their with others and material and their environments. And next slide will be the role of educator, which Francis will talk about it.
In the Reggio Emilia approach, the role of the teacher is very different from the traditional teaching. Instead of being the main source of the knowledge, the teacher is seen as a co-learning and collaboratory. That means that the teachers learn alongside the children and value their ideas and perspectives. Educators spend a lot of time observing and listening to the children's interests, questions, and conversation. Based on this observation, teachers support learning by asking open-ended questions and encouraging children to explore their ideas more deeply. Another important part of the teacher's role is the pedagogical documentation. This includes taking photos, writing notes, and display children's work to better understand how the children think and learn. Teachers also work closely with their educators and families to support children's development. Overall, the teacher's role is to guide the extended learning rather than controlling it. Next, we'll be talking about the image of the child. A key idea in Reggio Emilia approach is the image of a child. In this philosophy, children are viewed as the competent, capable, and curious learners. Instead of seeing children as an empty or needed to be filled with knowledge, they are seen as active participation in their own learning. Children construct knowledge through exploration, play, and relationship with others, including peers, educators, and their environment. Because of this view, educators respect children's ideas, perspectives, they listen carefully and allow children's interest to guide learning experiences. This approach also supports children's independence, confidence as they are encouraged to express their thinking in different ways. Understanding the role of the teacher and the image of a child help us see how learning is approached in Reggio Emilia. Now we will move on to how it's reflected in the curriculum, teaching, and method.
Thank you, Francis. For Reggio Emilia, the curriculum isn't something that's pre-planned or fixed in advance. Instead, it actually follows something that's called progettazione, which basically means that learning evolves over time based on children's interests, questions, and ideas. Teachers don't just deliver content, they observe children, listen to them, and then build learning experiences from what the children are naturally curious about. So it's a very flexible and responsive way of teaching rather than following a strict lesson plan. Another important idea is how children are viewed. In Reggio Emilia, children are seen as capable, competent, and full of potential. They're not just receiving information, they're actively constructing their own understanding of the world through exploration and interactions. This connects to the idea we spoke about many times before, the 100 languages of children, which means that children express their thinking in many different ways, not just through speaking or writing, but also through art, movement, play, and creativity. All of those forms of expressions are valued equally, which is why you often see a strong focus on art and creative activities in Reggio's classrooms. Moving into how this looks in practice. Relationships play a big role. Learning is seen as a social process, so children learn through interacting with their peers, teachers, families, and even wider community. Collaboration and conversation are a big part of how knowledge is built. Another key part is documentation and research. Teachers are constantly observing and documenting children's learning through photos, notes on their work. This isn't just for assessment, but it's also to reflect on how and what children are thinking and to help extend their learning further. So teaching becomes more like a shared research process between the teacher and the child. And finally, the environment is considered as the third teacher. Classrooms are carefully designed to encourage exploration, creativity, and interaction. The space isn't just static, it actually changes based on children's interests and ongoing projects, which help support their learning in a meaningful way. Moving on to theories and philosophies of Reggio Emilia. So Reggio Emilia isn't based on just one theory. Instead, it's influenced by several educational theories that all focuses on how children learn through experience, interactions, and relationships. First, social constructivism based on the work of Lev Vygotsky. This idea is that learning happens through social interactions. So children learn by talking, collaborating, and sharing ideas with others. In Reggio Emilia, we see this through group work, discussions, and strong relationships in classrooms. Next, moving on to constructivism by Jean Piaget. This focuses on how children actively build their own understanding through exploration. So instead of being told information, children learn by doing, experimenting, and discovering, which connects directly to Reggio's inquiry-based approach. Another influence is experimental learning by John Dewey. He believed that children learn based through real-life experiences and meaningful activities. This reflects in Reggio through project-based learning, where children explore topic deeply based on their interests. And finally, the philosophy of Loris Malaguzzi, who actually founded the approach. He believed that children are capable, creative, and full of potential. He also introduces the idea of 100 languages, meaning children expresses their thinking in many different ways, not just through words. So overall, Reggio Emilia brings together these theories to create a learning approach that is social, hands-on, and is centered around the child. Over to you, Alexa.
Thank you, Anisha. So now that we have a better understanding of what Reggio Emilia is like in theory, we would like to share with you some examples. First, we have a local example called Atelier Kids. So Atelier is a very popular principle in the Reggio Emilia system. Atelier Studio. Think back to your ECE 110 and 113 courses because we talk about the Atelier. And in Toronto, there is a center called Atelier Kids. It is guided by a philosophy that is centered by views of childhood as a time of wonder and exploration, where every child is an inherently capable, curious, and confident co-constructor of their own learning. So while they are the center, teachers or educators walk hand in hand with them, their partners essentially, in that learning journey. The mission is to empower children to express their ideas through inquiry based experiences that foster a lifelong love of discovery. So here we are again hearing inquiry based. And it's interesting because that's exactly what the pedagogy of Ontario is, right? It's inquiry based learning, it's play based learning, and it's highly inspired by a lot of principles as well of Reggio Emilia. Atelier Kids curriculum is rooted in the 100 languages of children, integrating science, language, math, and music through expressive arts and movement. A core component of their practice is the use of the environment as the third teacher through an outdoor focused curriculum that includes gardening and forest explorations in the nearby High Park. With spring now in season and cherry blossoms expected to bloom very soon, we can expect to see a lot of children from Atelier Kids coming out to check it out. Okay, so just a few photos as well from Atelier Kids. You can see that they highly value what the children are doing. They integrate as well the Indigenous learning here in Toronto. Self-portraits, because again, the child is the center, child is seen as competent, capable, and full of potential. They use the environment as a third teacher, deviating from using normal tools for art. And instead, as you can see on the table, they're using actual flowers, they're gardening, they're checking out the aquarium to see that, we're not alone in this world. The environment is very much alive, whether that's with the flora and fauna that you see, every rock, body of water, every creature. They explore their sense of expression as well through music and movement. They use light. They incorporate the community as well. So you can see here a little excursion that required them to take the TTC. And documentation here on the bottom left is an important part of it. They include the children in that documentation, and this is shared as well with the families. Now, if we go on the international scene, one example here is the Cascade School in Manila, Philippines. Cascade School is a Reggio Emilia inspired school that operates on 4 pillars: Reggio inspired setup, sustainable wellness and development, active citizenship rooted in kindness, and Batang Pinoy, or in English, the Filipino child, therefore incorporating the Filipino culture and tradition. The curriculum is progressive and developmentally appropriate for children ages 16 months to 9 years, focusing on skill building that scaffolds their primary inquiry. Their practice emphasizes the physical surroundings as the third teacher, utilizing first-class facilities for children as they find opportunities to exercise their citizenship and engage deeply with their environment. The snippets are directly from their Instagram. On the leftmost, you'll see a little documentation there. It says, "This week we began introducing the children to the investigative context of Earth. Together we wondered, what is the Earth made of? What stories or language does the Earth speak?" 100 languages essentially is banked on the child, but it also considers the environment. And the environment, like I said earlier, is not just people or nature. When you say nature, it could be flora, fauna. It could be other inanimate objects like the mountains, the soil, the rocks that you see. And behind every element is a story. What story is there for us to explore, to experience together? You can see here that they also play with lights, with cloths. There's a lot of open space for the children to kind of explore and express themselves through their bodies. Like I said earlier, Cascades talks about its cultural integration. So in English, this is how, like a rice cake, how to make puto. Um, and on the rightmost, you can see that the children are actually learning how to do things themselves, of course, with the guidance of their educators. Just like Atelier Kids Toronto, Cascade School in the Philippines also highly emphasizes the child as capable, competent, and full of potential. So, what better way to do that than to kind of focus on their self portraits, to explore their sense of self, even through art and movement? And again, materials. And today in our Pedagogy 413 class, we talked about loose parts and how that's also widely used in the Reggio Emilia school of thinking because, in a nutshell, the possibilities are endless. Okay. And now we move on to the Reggio Emilia critique. This will be done by Teresa.
Thank you, Alexa. Children learn by playing, exploring, and asking questions. It believes that children are smart, creative, and full of ideas. This method has a benefit of encouraging their creativity. Their ability is to develop and communicate their thoughts in many kind of ways that will going to provide them sense of confidence and assurance. The fact that children are collaborative is another positive aspect. They will develop collaborative skill by exchanging ideas, having conversation, and learning as a group in order to make learning feel more enjoyable and rather than just offering them an instruction. But there's like certain difficult as well in a busy classroom. It can be challenging for teachers to spend enough time observing students, taking notes, and organizing activities. Additionally, it can be also difficult for us to implement this strategy in a larger classroom because teachers might not able to attend every student. Another issue is that there is not always enough structure, and some children might require clearer instructions and expectation in order to feel comfortable. Overall, Reggio Emilia is a fantastic method to foster learning and creativity, but it also requires our time, preparation, and proper setting to be more effective. Now that we are aware of this kind of approach, let's explore some reflective questions to have a deeper understanding of how it's going to function in actual classroom setting. The first question is about how well is this approach can be used in different school and cultures.
I can speak to this. In the local context, we have Atelier Kids Toronto, and obviously Reggio Emilia is based in Italy, and I'm sure they have their own indigenous people there. But the indigenous part of the curriculum in Atelier Kids speaks highly to the Canadian indigenous culture. Reggio Emilia's approach can definitely integrate cultural contexts. So, for example, Atelier Kids. Uh, Introduces indigenous stories to the children. Specifically, that was for the toddler and preschool rooms. They encourage the children to draw what they felt, what they saw, what they understood from the story of the three sisters. In an international context, we also had Cascade School in the Philippines. And one of their key pillars is Batang Pinoy, or in English, again, it's the Filipino child. And so while the pedagogy is still very much Reggio Emilia in the sense that it centers on the child being capable, competent, full of potential, using the environment as a third teacher, it still integrates community. And that's precisely why Reggio Emilia was established in Italy, because it was really focused on that town, Reggio Emilia. So in the Philippine context, they're integrating the culture so that the children will be proud of who they are, because that's essentially a foundational concept to a child being capable, competent, and full of potential.
I think it's
Yeah.
also support children about the sense of belonging when they like engage with the environment.
Because culture is a part of who they are. Absolutely
Mhm.
agree.
Yeah.
I think what's important to note here too is when you talk about the child, right? We're going to keep saying it, capable, competent, full of potential. You need to focus on who is the child. And in the examples that we provided, you can see a lot of self portraits made by the children as they discover who they are. And so it's very important to bring in the cultural background of the child, of the families, because without the families, without their culture, you would essentially be missing a key part, a central part of who that child is.
So second question is what are some problems might this strategy provide in a larger classroom or like environments with limited resources?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with the fact that, there is no like fixed curriculum. When we go to placement, everything, even for us to do an activity or plan an activity, it's like there's no time. Everything is so fixed and curriculum based. And I know even though Reggio Emilia's main focus is on the child, how do we bring that into the current world that we're in, where we're trying to feed so much information into children on a daily basis?
Yep.
And we're trying to, how do we find that space where we still make sure we will the child as competent, capable, and full of potential, but at the same time, how do we get the child to be the center of the whole concept rather than feeding them information, even though we're saying we shouldn't be feeding them information, but we are doing that in practice and reality. It is hard to get that going. Is like what makes me question about it. So it's, how do we actually get the learning system right now, the curriculum, where how do we integrate that into the curriculum?
Right. And something as basic
Mhm.
as the ratio, right? We have to abide
Mhm.
by a ratio. And so let's say in a preschool room, and I actually did field placement in a Reggio inspired center during
Oh,
that preschool semester. And it was very hard because if the ratios, let's say not let's say, it actually is 1:8, I could see my mentor. She's also a Seneca graduate, and she genuinely loves the Reggio Emilia pedagogy, and she really tried to keep bringing that in. But for example, when we did our material exploration with paint, and we literally tried to cover the entire classroom in craft paper, similar to what the Seneca ECE lab school had before, because she actually caught that, right? So she's so lucky. Um, the ops head was a little hesitant for so many reasons, but the gist is essentially one, it's creating a lot of mess, and where there's mess, you're going to have to do the cleanup, and with this economy, a lot of resources and materials are just way too expensive to get on a monthly basis or bi-weekly basis. The second is the ratio. Like I said earlier, it was pretty difficult, especially because children may have different temperaments. Some children may be into the activity or the encounter, and some may not. So, to make sure that you have your eyes on everybody while facilitating that engagement can be quite challenging in a bigger classroom, especially if, let's say, it's a classroom of 24 children. Wow. Um, Maybe doing it in smaller groups would be recommended, because that's what we did, and it turned out to be okay. Yeah.
and documentation is a very key part in Reggio Emilia's work. And like aligning with what you said with the ratio, and when you have a classroom full of 24 children and you're the educator, finding time to do all of that can be challenging and difficult, because I've seen it in a lot of placement where when the focus is too much on the documentation, you actually forget what you're doing and that you're with children, you're also responsible for the children.
Yeah.
For kindergarten to school age, children are a bit more, I'd say, responsible, but when you're in a toddler classroom or when you're in an infant classroom, documentation can be a real challenge when you're keeping an eye out for children and having to document at the same time, because
Yeah.
it's hard to balance both.
Yeah, they're fast.
Yeah. When you blink once and then, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Because right now I'm in kindergarten, which is we have 24 students. We have like a limited time from everything. We need to follow some instruction. So whatever, like 15 minutes done, they're gonna go, and then you're kind of like you don't know what to do anymore, because you have to follow your schedule, and every child, like, they already know the rules. After the time, all done.
But
So third question is how these methods make it difficult to identify and communicate children's development. I think documenting and tracking the process in documentation is can be challenging. Like Anisha said earlier, you have to spend a lot of time writing, observing every children, especially you don't have just one children. You have like 24 in kindergarten, you have a lot of children in just one class.
yeah.
Reggio Emilia doesn't necessarily rely on standardizing like
No.
any assessments,
No.
right? So it can be
Yes.
difficult to measure where the child is
Yeah.
like developmentally, where the child's
Yes.
at, because there's no standardized method of actually observing and setting. There's no checklist, right? There's no fixed
Yes.
benchmark to say, okay, check, you're good. So this is where the child's at, what the child's developmentally at. It's hard to gauge with.
That was exactly what I was going to say,
Yeah.
Anisha. That
Okay.
essentially, like, it makes a lot of sense, especially when you consider the context of early childhood care and education.
Mhm.
Absolutely, it's perfect for introducing them to, discover themselves, their families, the community, the environment. And again, the environment is an abundance of things from flora, fauna, other inanimate objects, the animals around. There's so much there. But I honestly have yet to see Reggio Emilia in practice after the early years. I think the
Yes.
oldest I've seen is, again, with Cascade School in the Philippines, it goes up to age 9, which I think is beautiful. Um,
That
but
is, yeah.
majority of the world really subscribes to traditional teaching methods, and as we've seen in our last 2 years at Seneca, it can be a little rigid. The structure can be a little stifling, so I think it would be hard to communicate the development because, number one, there is no set kind of like developmental standards in Reggio because they're focusing on the child, on the child's
Yes.
interests, on documentation that's again co-constructed by both the educator and the child, shared with the families. And it's hard to kind of make, I mean, you're not speaking apples to apples at this point. So,
Yeah.
for example, when preschool children in a Reggio Emilia inspired center have to go to kindergarten where there's a set kindergarten program, and with a new kindergarten program that's launched this year, right?
Yes.
That will demand essentially more academic rigor, academic readiness, your math, your English literacy and writing skills, your science. It would be kind of hard to marry those two together. So I think that's one kind of setback, and I think it's also one of the reasons why you will see a lot of schools, not just in Canada but even abroad. That's why you can't say it's just Reggio Emilia. That's why the specific term is Reggio Emilia inspired,
Yes.
because a lot of the pedagogy does stem from Reggio Emilia, but they do supplement that with more structured, and I'll put that in air quotes repeatedly, a more structured approach to tracking developmental milestones. So again, I worked in placement center. I worked in Viva Kids Academy here in Toronto. They are a Reggio Emilia inspired center. Um, Again, they specifically say it's inspired. They can't claim it's Reggio Emilia alone because they also use the Ontario pedagogy. So, how does learning happen? They use resources such as the Look-See, and that's primarily, and of course, Elect. Those two tools are primarily what they use in gauging developmental milestones of the children there, because Reggio doesn't have that.
And Reggio Emilia, the child expresses through all kinds of
Yeah.
ways, right? Art, play, movement, conversation. So there's no like obvious measuring, like there's nothing measurable. And it's because children express this learning in different ways, it's harder to interpret and compare developmental across all children, because one child's way of expression is completely different to another child's, and where do you draw the
Yeah.
line and say, okay, this is where they stand? So
Absolutely. Okay, thank you, Teresa. That was a really lovely discussion. And thanks, team, for that. Lastly, before we head towards the references and end this webinar, we wanted to share the 100 Languages poem. Very popular, but it's very important that we imbibe this specific poem and specific part of the pedagogy. So let's read through it now.
The 100 languages. The child is made of 100. The child has 100 languages, 100 hands, 100 thoughts, 100 ways of thinking, of playing, of speaking.
100, always 100 ways of listening, of marveling, of loving, 100 joys for singing and understanding, 100 worlds to discover, 100 worlds to invent, 100 worlds to dream.
the child has 100 languages and 100 more, but they steal 99. The school and the culture separate the head from the body. They tell the child to think without hands, to do without head, to listen and not to speak, to understand without joy, to love and to marvel, only at Easter and at Christmas.
They tell the child to discover the world already there, and of the 100 they treat 99. They tell the child that work and play, reality and fantasy, science and imagination, sky and earth, reason and dream are things that do not belong together.
And thus they tell the child that the 100 is not there. The child says, "No way, the 100 is there." These are our references. Thank you so much for your attention.